Hi, the Zickland peoples. You're listening to Your Morning Jacket. Your Morning Joe. Obviously. You're listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast with Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart, weekly music news for the new music business. Take it away, guys.
From Billboard, Spotify has led the music business to record growth. So why are artists and songwriters so angry?
And from Music Business Worldwide, Universal Music Group and Spotify have a new deal. It wipes out Spotify's infamous audiobook bundle royalty discount in the United States.
Another from Billboard, 18 music industry power players share predictions for 2025. And Jay, if it would have been 20, I'm quite sure we would have been on that list. Just saying. Well, we're glad you're here. We're going to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
There are horses in heaven, so I bet that God's a cowboy, heading off into the sunset in a big white Stetson hat. Every time you hear the thunder, it's just a posse full of angels riding those horses up in heaven, golden saddles on their backs.
How about that Randy Travis, Horses in Heaven? Such a great song. Randy Travis released a new single this last week, and this ballad was written by John Randall and Matt Nolan, and it was created with the help of vocal AI. Last year, Randy Travis released his first new song in more than a decade, and that song was Where That Came From. The song was co-written by country veterans John Scott Sherrill and Scotty Emmerich, and there was a lot of excitement and curiosity among fans about how it was created. Randy Travis has been mostly unable to sing or speak since suffering a near-fatal stroke in 2013.
Right. And it's such a really wonderful story. But it's, of course, there's so much confusion with AI. And this is an interesting thing to kind of mention. The U.S. Copyright Office releases Part 2 of Artificial Intelligence Report clarifying copyrightable of generative AI outputs. So the office also attempted to clarify another muddy area of copyright protection using generative AI, which was the extent a generative AI program could be used as a tool for consenting creators when using their own human creations as the AI inputs, especially in relation to disabled creators and if protection was warranted in that case.
Right. The office opines that protection would be available in this instance. Quote, "We stress that to the extent these functionalities are used as tools to recast, transform, or adapt an author's expression, copyright protection would be available for the resulting work," end quote. They use the example of Randy Travis, who can no longer sing due to a stroke, like we mentioned, using a special purpose AI vocal model on a recording of his voice before the stroke as using AI as a tool rather than new content generation. Therefore, the office would deem it copyrightable and register the work. And we're going to get into this in a second because there is a little bit of confusion around what's copyrightable and what's not.
Well, and even just AI, how does that work? In this particular case, I kind of think of it like if you were a fan of the Lord of the Rings movie, you might know that the actor Andy Serkis did all the movements for Gollum, and he had this suit on that had these little balls on them that they could then essentially wrap the character in the computer around the movement that the actor, the real-time actor, did. And this, as I understand it, is very similar to the way they did this track. They basically had another person singing it, and they were able to wrap Randy's voice essentially around it.
Right, and all based on machine learning on his body of work. Really cool stuff. And speaking of AI, there's been so much going on in the news and so many conversations. So you and I were so fortunate to have some industry leaders for AI join us this week for a special Your Morning Coffee episode. We're calling it our AI Roundtable. And we're going to drop that this coming Wednesday. And that's with Kristen Robinson from Billboard. You know her from her Machine Learning's newsletter, which is so good. Our friend Bobby Owsinski from Music 3.0. He also wrote the Musician's AI Handbook that we talk about so much. Our friend Matt Adele from Music AI. And Virginie Berger from Matchtune. Just some really insightful discussions around music and AI to sort of break this stuff down.
It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I was just sitting there with my mouth open. It was just really fascinating. And to have those folks all together, we were super blessed, super blessed. By the way, in other AI news, this is from Billboard. Speaking of Kristen Robinson, Deezer says its new AI detection tool found 10% of songs delivered to the platform, check this out, are AI generated. To support human-made music, the French streaming service says it's now developing a tagging system to remove fully AI tracks from algorithmic recommendations.
Yeah, here we go. We've been talking about this. You have to identify it and then take it down. There was another piece written by Robert Levine in Billboard, and the headline was, "We were surprised how obvious it was, the case against AI in the EU." So German PRO, GEMA, filed a lawsuit against generative AI company Suno in Munich that could be stronger than the RIAA case in the US, but just as important.
Right. So writer Robert Levine provides a link to listen to several of the songs to which GEMA licenses rights and compare them to songs created by the generative music AI software Suno. Now, you may not know the songs, but you'll get the idea either way. They are among the works over which GEMA, the German PRO, is suing Suno. And while those examples are selected to make a point based on significant testing of AI prompts, the similarities are remarkable.
Right. They have this thing on this site where you can listen to each one, the one created by Suno and then the original track. And Suno has never said whether it's trained its AI software on copyrighted works, but the obvious similarities seem to suggest that it did. And Suno did not respond to a request for comment.
Wow. That surprise, huh? Another one from Music Business Worldwide and Daniel Tenser. Can AI-generated content be copyrighted? Here's what a new report from the U.S. Copyright says, and the verdict: a work created solely through AI is not copyrightable, but a work that combines human creativity with AI can be copyrighted so long as there is a sufficient amount of human expression in that work, much like we were talking about with the Randy Travis track.
Exactly. And then from The Verge, this is from Lauren Feiner. The headline was, "Purely AI-generated art can't get copyright protection, says Copyright Office." So generative artificial intelligence output based purely on text prompts, which we're talking about, even detailed ones, it isn't protected by current copyright law, according to the U.S. Copyright Office. Human-created works with AI elements, however, can still be copyrighted as a whole.
Right. Interesting. Hey, by the way, don't miss Shorefire Media's best calendar. We love it when they put this out. It is so damn handy to just basically look and see what all the activities and stuff you need to be aware of in the music business are
This
happening.
is a must-have. It comes out a couple times a year, and it's from the PR firm Shorefire. We love the people over there and have worked with them for years. But they call it their best calendar, and you can have it so it just populates your Google Calendar, or you can get a PDF. But the link is in the Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and I highly recommend that you grab this thing, because you can just look by month and see all the different festivals and conferences and just holidays, everything with this thing. It is absolutely the best. And before we get into the stories, I wanted to talk about, just really briefly, our friend Tony van Veen. He's the CEO of Disc Makers. He posted a video this last week, and sort of the headline was, "How much did Spotify steal from indie artists in 2024?" Very provocative, but I pulled out a minute or so of that. Let's listen into Tony van Veen.
How much in royalties earned by independent artists in 2024 did Spotify not pay out to you, the independent artist community? As you undoubtedly remember, in late 2023, Spotify announced that it was going to stop paying royalties on all tracks that had less than 1,000 streams. The black hole of streaming tracks, so to speak, represents tracks with under 1,000 streams that don't monetize. If you do the math, that's 175.5 million tracks, almost a whopping 87% of all tracks on Spotify. Let that sink in for a second. Since Spotify implemented their rule that tracks under 1,000 streams won't monetize, they have effectively demonetized 87% of all the tracks on the platform. In order to figure out how much that means in royalties that you didn't get paid, let's dig a little deeper and take a look at how the non-monetizing tracks break down. Of the non-monetizing tracks, 34.6 million had between 101 and 999 streams. 47.7 million had between 11 and 100 streams, and a whopping 93.2 million tracks had 0 to 10 streams. Okay, so now we have all the data we need to estimate the royalty amount that should have been paid for the streams of these tracks that didn't monetize. Total them up, and you come to 14.2 billion non-monetized streams. And if you divide those 14.2 billion streams by the 175.5 million non-monetizing tracks, you end up with an average of just 81 streams per track, which feels appropriately conservative if you ask me. All right. Now, let's multiply those streams by an average Spotify royalty of 0.33 cents per stream, and you end up with the following royalty numbers that should have been paid out. For the 0 to 10 stream tracks, it's about $620,000. For the 11 to 100 stream tracks, it's a more substantial $6.3 million. And for the 101 to 999 stream tracks, it's almost $40 million, for a grand total of $46.9 million in royalties.
Wow.
He breaks down the math.
He breaks down the math, and boy, the math can be kind of scary. I do want to mention also our good friend Rick Beato, who we just love. He's got a wonderful YouTube channel, and he's got what I think he was basically a new thing called the Beato Pod. And this is latest one is with Bob Lefsetz. It's the first episode, and it's live on his new second YouTube channel, Rick Beato 2. And I think everybody probably knows who Bob Lefsetz is. If you don't, he is, how would you describe him, Jay? He is a firebrand, right?
He's a flamethrower. You know,
He's a flamethrower.
I've been in touch with Bob. We're trying to get him on the podcast here, and I've read his things for years. And I'll tell you, if you want to listen to a couple of really great episodes of his podcast, he interviews Michael Rapino from Ticketmaster Live Nation, which is amazing. He interviews Irving Azoff on one of them, which is fantastic.
Yes,
whether you love him or hate him, you know, he has his opinions. And this first episode that you mentioned of the Beato Pod, it's a video on his new Rick Beato 2 channel. Check that out. Also, just really quickly, Glenn Peoples and I dropped our latest podcast, the Billboard Behind the Set List. This one's with the band Fantagram. And if you haven't heard these guys, it's super interesting. They're really involved in not only their sound, but also in all of their creative, whether that's merch or videos and all of that. really interesting interview with Fanagram, and we recorded an episode that's going to drop in a week or so with Rick Springfield. He's got this Greatest Hits Volume 2 coming out. He's got a coffee table book that I photographed, and that's coming out February 14th. So we talked to Rick, and it's really fascinating because there's some things you may not know about Rick. Like, he was on the Sonny and Cher show once. His band flew to Vietnam and played for the troops. I mean, there's so many great stories, and I won't, spoil all of them, but you'll want to check that one out. And then one of the last things before we get into the stories is there was this story that came out in Newsweek by Marnie Rose McFall, and the headline was Spotify faces boycott calls over royalties and Trump inauguration donation. So she kicks it off by just saying that social media users and artists have issued a call to boycott Spotify, citing that the recent judge ruling on royalties, the company hosting an inauguration brunch for Trump, and donating money to the official ceremony.
Right, but Spotify was not the only tech company involved in Trump's inauguration. A number of CEOs were seen at the inauguration as Trump begins his second term in the White House with a shift in tone after previous clashes with companies like Meta and Google. So, wow, very interesting.
Yeah.
And Jay, we got to thank our sponsors, man. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and we're not light guys, so that hurts their shoulders, but they still come back, and we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. First, with the Mechanical Licensing Collective, the MLC is a nonprofit organization, and it's making a big difference for songwriters, music publishers, and other rights holders by transforming how they receive mechanical streaming royalties from services like Spotify and Apple Music in the U.S. Every month, the MLC collects the streaming data and the royalties from those platforms. It matches the money to the creator who's earned it, and then it pays them out, or their publishers and admin partners, the royalties that they're due. To date, the MLC has already distributed over $2.5 billion in total royalties and has nearly 500,000 members worldwide. If you're a songwriter, composer, lyricist, or a music streamer, maybe even a publisher or an admin, you need to become a member of the MLC to ensure that you're not leaving any money on the table. Best of all, membership is completely free, and the MLC pays out 100% of the royalties that it takes in. So visit themlc.com to learn more.
And we are also sponsored by Music.ai. Music.ai is a trailblazing AI-powered music and audio platform offering an expansive suite of over 50 stackable AI audio solutions. Want to change the tempo or pitch of your song, adjust instruments or vocals, mute background noise in a movie? Music.ai makes it easy. Embraced by record labels, agencies, tech firms, and developers, Music.ai is synonymous with audio innovation. With over 45 million users, their tools process over 2 million minutes of audio daily. They can process yours today. Go over to music.ai to get started, and I can say from experience, their stuff is awesome.
It really is.
Cool tools over there. Wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you wonder who this guy is that I get to hang out with every week on the podcast, it is Jay Gilbert. He is a music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and the Warner Music Group.
Yeah, and color me thankful. Every week I get to do this podcast with Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. And, every week we hop on and drink a little coffee, and, well, I do, and talk about, what books we've read and what, articles we've read and maybe videos we've seen. And it's really the highlight of my week. So we're just sort of letting you in on a little bit of coffee talk here.
Indeed. Well, let's jump into the stories. The first one is from Billboard and our friend Glenn Peoples from his Billboard newsletter, The Ledger, which, by the way, if you don't subscribe to that, you need to.
It's free.
It's free, for crying out loud. The article is entitled, Spotify has led the music business to record growth. So why are artists and songwriters so angry? Despite huge gains in industry revenues, individual creators feel they're being cheated by streaming, a paradox that's proving difficult to solve.
Yeah, this is super interesting. Glenn says that January is not even over yet. Well, it is now. And 2025 already feels like a peak year for animosity towards Spotify. And that's saying something given the criticism the company has attracted since emerging in 2008 as a potential savior for the piracy-riddled music industry. Even though music and commerce have always been uncomfortable partners in a marriage of necessity, the relationship has never been sourer.
Say that 3 times fast.
Nope.
Sourer.
Nope.
No. He says, call it the Spotify paradox. Streaming, led by Spotify, has made the music business the biggest it's been in 25 years, allowed unsigned artists to reach fans around the world, revived the popularity of local language music, and enabled artists to sell their catalogs at valuations unthinkable a decade earlier. And yet, discontent has never been greater. Industry revenues are soaring, but many artists and songwriters are struggling and angry.
Right. And by the way, that Rick Beato video that we were talking about with Bob Lefsetz, he has some strong opinions about that.
Yes, he does.
And you should dig into that. So Glenn goes on to say that part of the disgruntlement can be explained by simple math. There are more songs by more artists chasing a finite amount of listeners' attention. Spotify had a catalog of 35 million songs at the end of 2017. That's according to its F1 filing. At the end of 2023, the latest count available, Spotify had over 100 million tracks and 5 million podcasts. That's nearly a 3-fold increase in catalog in just 6 years. And although its subscribers grew more than 3-fold to 236 million from 71 million over that time span, Spotify's success at keeping its listeners engaged is such that the per-stream royalty, the metric most people associate with the economic health and fairness, is lower than that of its peers.
Right. By the way, you can see Liz Dilts Marshall's recent article that ranks streaming services by per-stream royalties according to a report from catalog investor Duetti. Very interesting. That's in the newsletter. Global recorded music revenues have improved greatly over that time span, rising 81% to almost $27 billion in 2023. That's up from a little under $16 billion in 2017. That's according to the IFPI. But as industry revenues have consistently grown, individual artists whose numbers are growing fast because barriers to entry no longer exist don't feel like they're receiving a fair share of the bounty. Discontent is so noticeable because, in part, there are more artists to complain.
Right. And Glenn writes that 3 decades ago, it required a record contract to enter the commercial music world. Today, anyone can do it. Luminate tracked an average of 99,000 new tracks uploaded to DSPs on average every day in 2024. That's about 36 million new tracks competing for listeners' attention every year. On Spotify alone, 5 million artists had a catalog of at least 100 tracks, according to the company's latest Loud and Clear report.
Wow. Of course, per-stream payouts could be improved if Spotify encouraged people to listen less, thereby reducing the number of songs paid out from a fixed pool of money and raising the average per-stream royalty. With less music streamed, the average payout would shoot well beyond its current 0.3 cents per stream, but that would be counterproductive. In the streaming world, growth comes from keeping people engaged and ultimately turning them into paying subscribers. You turn away listeners and they could end up at social media platforms where payouts are even skimpier, or broadcast radio, which pays artists and record labels nothing.
That's right. Many people see the royalties from purchases are fairer than streaming royalties, but listening and buying habits have changed how that money flows. As more people streamed more often, artists and songwriters received less money from old formats. In the fourth quarter of 2017, AM/FM radio accounted for 48% of Americans' time spent listening to audio, while streaming, including YouTube and podcasts, took a 26.5% share, according to Edison Research. By the fourth quarter of 2023, AM/FM commanded just a 36% share, while streaming, including podcasts, accounted for 45%.
Well, including audiobooks, which are both streamed and downloaded, that number rises to 48%. Owned music's share of listening, like sales of CDs, vinyl downloads, which fell sharply over that time span, dropped from 13% in 2017 to just 4% in 2023. Also in the streaming economy, new artists are competing for royalties with older songs. In the U.S. in 2024, catalog music, of course that's defined as more than 18 months old, accounted for 73.3% of total album equivalent consumption. That's according to Luminate.
Right. And much of the discontent over Spotify, however, is less wonky and more human. The company's actions have become widely seen as antithetical to the artists it claims to support. A turning point came in December when Harper's ran an excerpt from Liz Pelly's Mood Machine book that reveals, among other things, how Spotify bought music from nameless musicians to infuse some of these playlists, and namely background music like chill, where brand names aren't necessary. The cost-saving alternatives to professional musicians who would receive royalties for each stream. This alleged use of fake musicians, we call them ghost artists, has been reported in music circles for years, but Pelly's book, in part because of its deep reporting and previously unknown detail, captured mainstream attention rarely attained by a music industry topic that doesn't involve Taylor Swift. And I would just add that you and I, if you haven't heard it, Mike and I interviewed Liz Pelly for our podcast, and we talked about her book, Mood Machine, and it's a special episode. It's live, and if you haven't heard it, it's a good one.
It's a really good one. The Harper's article and Pelly's ensuing book tour spawned a flood of reviews and reactions. Articles about how Spotify devalues music, hurts artists, gives users a poor listening experience, and is an algorithm-driven song picker that provides its users only an illusion of choice. But the onslaught of Spotify coverage at old school media is nothing compared to the countless videos uploaded to YouTube over the years. If you enter a search phrase such as Spotify hurts artists or maybe Spotify royalties, and you can wade for hours through such topics as Spotify's change in royalty payouts, and saying things like Spotify no longer paying artists for streams in 2024, and explainers on royalty accounting like Spotify doesn't pay artists, this is why, you're going to be there for a while.
Contributing to the storm clouds was Spotify's scheme to lower its royalties to songwriters and publishers. Last March, you'll remember, and we talked about this a lot, Spotify licensed the songwriting community. They incensed the songwriting community when it adopted a lower mechanical royalty rate by contending its premium subscription tiers, music and audio, that offer qualified for a reduced royalty rate granted to bundles of digital services. Unsurprisingly, the publishing community, including numerous Grammy Songwriter of the Year nominees, said they wouldn't attend Spotify's Songwriter of the Year Grammy party, which ended up being canceled anyway in the wake of the fires in Los Angeles. Earlier this week, a U.S. court agreed with Spotify, saying that federal royalty rules are unambiguous, and rejecting the Mechanical Licensing Collective's lawsuit, arguing that Spotify was not actually offering a bundle of services.
Writing the biggest checks of any streaming service doesn't get Spotify out of this paradox. This week, Spotify announced it paid $10 billion to the music industry in 2024. That's a tenfold increase from a decade earlier. That figure implies Spotify generated nearly 20% of the global music copyright, assuming 2024 saw an 8% increase from Will Page's latest estimate of $45.5 billion in 2023. As Spotify's payments to the music industry increased tenfold over the last decade, streaming growths help compensate for declines in CD and download sales, and global recorded music revenues more than doubled from 2014 to 2024. But again, aggregate industry gains don't capture the experience of individual artists who feel cheated by streaming economics.
Glenn goes on to say that help could be on the way someday. If it's higher per stream royalty artists want, then changing how royalties are calculated could make a difference. Currently, a streaming service pays royalties by divvying up all user subscription and advertising revenue amongst all the tracks streamed during a given month. Whether or not you listen to Taylor Swift, your subscription fees go into the same pile of money funded by Taylor Swift's fans. An alternative to this could... it's gained some traction. That is user-centric approach that pays artists from each individual listener. Under this scheme, a listener's subscription fees or advertising revenue goes only to the artist that person streamed. That's a more favorable approach, for album-oriented niche artists and less appealing for popular songs that get repeat listens. So far, only SoundCloud has really adopted the user-centric model.
So artist royalties also stand to benefit from efforts to clean up streaming services catalogs. Spotify and Deezer have signed on to Universal Music Group's plan to reward professional musicians by demoting functional music and incentivizing distributors to crack down on fraud. Deezer has removed tens of millions of low-quality tracks, and anti-fraud measures may explain why the number of daily new tracks uploaded to streaming services fell about 4% in 2024. That's according to Luminate. But not all artists feel like they are benefiting from these changes. Spotify's move to limit royalty payments to tracks with at least 1,000 streams was widely seen as harmful to developing artists.
Right. There's been a lot of talk about that. That's nearly 87% of those ISRCs that are uploaded every year. Glenn goes on to say this: the Spotify paradox may never end, but artists can adjust to their new environment. In 2014, Taylor Swift's catalog was removed from Spotify by her record label, Big Machine Label Group. Earlier that year, Swift had penned an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal that argued, quote, music should not be free, end quote, and urged artists to realize their worth and ask for it. Her entire catalog returned to Spotify and other platforms in 2017. Did the economics of streaming change during Swift's 3-year hiatus? No, not really. Licensing deals have extracted marginally better terms for artists and record labels, but streaming royalties are still a fraction of a cent per stream. One thing that has changed was more of Swift's fans became subscribers to Spotify, Apple Music, which launched in 2015, and other streaming platforms. Today, free streaming still exists, and a stream is still worth a fraction of a cent, but Taylor Swift is a case study in how to cultivate a vibrant streaming business while reviving the lost art of album sales. Great piece by Glenn Peoples, and do subscribe to his weekly newsletter, The Ledger. It's the best.
You will not be sorry. It is very well worth your time. Our next story, Jay, it's from Music Business Worldwide and our good friend Tim Ingham. Universal Music Group and Spotify have a new deal. It wipes out Spotify's infamous audiobook bundle royalty discount in the U.S. So according to Music Business Worldwide sources, Spotify has agreed to effectively eliminate its infamous mechanical royalty bundle discount for Universal Music Publishing Group and its songwriters in the U.S.
Interesting. How is UMG's new agreement with Spotify scrub the mechanical royalty discount from the way that Daniel Ek's company pays Universal Music Publishing Group and its songwriters? We're told it's complex. After all, the current mechanical royalty situation is guided by a statutory ruling for music publishers in the U.S. made by the Copyright Royalty Board, the CRB.
And that was Phono Records 4, by the way. One of our sources, this is Music Business Worldwide saying this, one of our sources tells us UMG's new deal with Spotify encompasses some kind of direct agreement between UMPG and the streamer. So they say, like you, we await more details, and they've asked both Spotify and Universal Music Group for comments, but apparently have gotten none yet.
Well, they had an update, and the update was a Spotify spokesperson provided the following statement, quote, Spotify maintains its bundle, but with this direct deal with UMPG, it has evolved to account for broader rights, including a different economic treatment for music and non-music content, end quote.
Well, like we said, it's a complex picture, but it's Music Business Worldwide job to try and make it as simple as for our readers to comprehend, and they stand by the reporting above. So Spotify's bundle discount started hitting the U.S. music right holder payouts in spring of last year, actually.
Yeah, and under a 2022 legal settlement, like you said, called Phono Records 4, music publishers accepted that bundled multimedia services in the U.S. were permitted to pay a lower mechanical royalty rate than standalone music subscription services. Spotify then added audiobooks to its standard premium subscription tier before claiming this addition made that tier bundling offer, thus applying the Phonorecords IV discount for U.S. mechanical royalty payouts. According to estimates, the move would have saved Spotify over $100 million in royalty payouts in 2024.
But as you may remember, and as we reported, it also attracted legal action. The Mechanical Licensing Collective, the MLC, filed a lawsuit against Spotify in May of 2024, last year, alleging that that platform was illegally underpaying royalties to songwriters and publishers as a result of the bundling move.
Right, but outside the bundling element of UMG and Spotify's new deal, the new agreement is expected to be influenced by Universal's Streaming 2.0 manifesto, which was first unveiled at the company's Capital Markets Day, CMD, in London last year.
Right. Well, at that CMD, UMG, that's a lot of letters, by the way, at the Capital Markets Day in London last year, Universal Music Group explained that Streaming 2.0 represented a new era of digital music focused on changes. And those changes include streaming subscription offerings becoming segmented with more expensive options for music superfans, and subscription ARPU, that's the average revenue per user, moving upwards across music platforms, partly as a result of the aforementioned superfan targeted offerings and partly as a result of future streaming price increases.
Right. In December, Universal announced a new multi-year licensing agreement with Amazon Music. Universal Music Group boss Sir Lucian Grange said that contract was anchored in the principles of Streaming 2.0. Spotify and UMG updated their existing licensing agreement as recently as March last year, agreeing to collaborate on, quote, new promotional and social tools, end quote, for UMG artists on the Spotify platform.
And that announcement was believed to be an additive update to a formal multi-year licensing agreement between UMG and Spotify that was signed back in 2022 or 2023. You may remember in July of 2023, Sir Lucian Grange told investors on a UMG earnings call that as part of this agreement, Spotify has committed to work to address, in quotation marks, concerns around streaming platforms being flooded, also in quotation marks, with tracks that content that music fans do not want.
Yeah, finally, the new deal that was revealed by Music Business Worldwide is understood to supersede any previous agreements between the two parties. And another great piece from Music Business Worldwide. Before we jump into our last story, let's thank our sponsors, Hypebot and Bandsintown. Hypebot since 2004. They've chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Edited daily by our friend founder, Bruce Houghton, with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bandsintown.
Indeed, Bandsintown. Over 90 million live music fans trust Bandsintown to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It is the #1 artist service platform, connecting over 650,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
Yes.
Big thanks.
Yeah,
Hypebot and Bandsintown.
We really appreciate it. And our last story is from Billboard and from Dan Reese, who I've been mispronouncing his name for years. Sorry, Dan. The headline, 18 music industry power players share predictions for 2025. And in January, which we just passed, it can only mean one thing. It's time to make some predictions about the coming year. And the folks at Billboard already put their heads together to come up with some pretty bold predictions around TikTok, catalogs, Live Nation, mergers, ticket prices, Streaming 2.0, and emerging markets, among other things, as well as the top stories to watch in 2025, like the Diddy trial and streaming fraud crackdowns, AI regulation battles, distribution consolidation, and the future biopics, and plenty more.
Suffice to say, there's a lot going on in the music business right now, and as the industry geared up for the Grammy Awards that was just this last Sunday, refashioned this year by the Recording Academy as a fundraiser to support the wildfire relief here in the LA area, Billboard has released its annual Power 100 ranking of the most powerful executives in the music business. And who better to ask for predictions for 2025 than some of the most powerful people in the music business? Nah. Perfect idea.
So good. And by the way, that Power 100 ranking is our lead story in your morning coffee, the newsletter this last week, as well as this. And here's some of the responses. And these are from players across the industry, from tongue-in-cheek slam dunks to the thoughtful breakdowns of genre trends and advertising shifts and how technology will continue to shape how the business of music is conducted and the continued strength of catalog sales. Some of these predictions are in line with those selected by Billboard staffers, while others are born out of passions and expertise by some of the business leaders populating this year's Power 100 ranking. So all of them are worth a look as the business begins to heat up for this new year.
And Dan says, let the games begin. So the first person they chatted with, Tyler Arnold over at Mercury Records, who said most artists will break. More artists, I should say, will break than we have been seeing in recent years. We saw it with Noah Kahan, and this year's Best New Artist nominees. Artist development is now a longer process, but if you're patient, persistent, and invest in the right talent, you can have these incredible moments 5 to 10 years into artists' careers.
Amen, Tyler. The next one's from Scooter Braun, who's now over at Hybe, of course. And he says that new frontiers in technology will bring the artist closer than ever to the fan. Last year alone, our superfan platform, Weverse, held over 70 online concerts and attracted over 700 million views, sold 18 million pieces of merch, and released 40 Weverse albums and 9.4 million unit sales. With artists like Kid Laroi, Megan Thee Stallion, Dua Lipa joining this year, it's only growing and will continue to do so in 2025.
And Mike Karen over at APG said the next generation will shake the tree and much will come loose. A man of few words, but powerful words, Jay.
Okay.
Oh, and then Charisse Clark-Sories over at Harborview Equity Partners said, artistically, I hope to see more experimental mashups. I love seeing Shabuzi crushing the country charts, Post Malone going from pop to rock to country music, and K-pop collaborations with artists like Usher, Megan Thee Stallion, and Selena Gomez. I really encourage more of these types of mashups because I believe this is the world Gen Z and Gen Alpha love to live in.
And the next one is from Tina Davis from Empire. Tina says that music is cyclical, which leads to a resurgence of past genres and listeners to discover them. I believe rock will continue to grow with the fusion of multiple new sounds and create credible subgenres. Rap music will transition into a more conscious space, and there will be a noticeable pushback from listeners who are seeking out music that offers more depth and introspection to mirror the times. There's been too many negative things happening in the world, and recent legislation has been trying to establish criminal intent with certain rap lyrics, so it would be hard for mainstream rap to stay on this trajectory. There will certainly be a cultural shift for a more thought-provoking form of expression.
David Dunn over at Shot Tower Capital said, we will continue to see a wider range of music companies accessing the ABS, that's the asset-backed securities markets, and securitizing their royalty streams. The high levels of leverage and interest rates relative to bank financing makes the current ABS market exceptionally attractive. And Daniel Glass over at Glassnote Records really pushed the envelope.
He went out on a limb. Yeah.
He went on a limb. He says Taylor Swift will have a #1 album. Wow.
Thanks for your time, Daniel. The next one was from Wendy Goldstein from Republic Records, and she said that artist catalogs will continue to soar, fueled by streaming growth, licensing opportunities, and the rising demand for legacy music across platforms. And then Sam Hendel from Dundee Partners, he agreed. He said catalog will endure. The emotional connection we all have with the songs we love will continue to translate to the long-form value of music copyrights. In 2025, I think we'll see new ways to monetize fandom, continued progress on the artist-centric model, which we just talked about, and more accessible ways for fans to interact with their favorite music.
And our friend David Israelite over at the NMPA says interest in buying catalogs will increase. Okay, got that. Check. Okay. Larry Jackson over at Gamma said the independent label market share will eclipse the major label market share for the first time ever. It's not an indictment of the effectiveness of the latter, but rather just what a majority of the new artists understandably believe in and subscribe to.
Yeah, and Golnar Khosrowshahi said that in 2025, she's with Reservoir, by the way, if you don't know, she predicts that the conversation with AI, it may shift, from questions surrounding the legality of using existing IP to train AI to the proliferation of AI-driven B2B solutions. We could see particularly stark efficiencies achieved for data management, a key facet of the music business.
Right, and Vivian Lewitt said over at YouTube, I do expect that we are likely to see continued consolidation in the independent music sector, while Brian Monaco over at Sony Music Publishing said sonic branding will emerge as a popular offering for songwriters and artists, creating new opportunities for brands to express their identity through music. Each year, people's lives are becoming more screen dominant, and brands are seeking new ways to stand out. With a memorable sound, brands can generate emotions that deepen connections with audiences. Brands crafting soundscapes that stick in consumers' head, just like a hot song, will be better positioned to break through.
Right. And finally, our friend Ula Oberman over at TikTok said that he thinks that metal and electronic music are two genres that will grow the most in 2025. And finally, Greg Perloff from Another Planet Entertainment, he just said that Live Nation will do very well and continue to grow market share. Okay, well, a lot of thought was put into that. Some really interesting takes from those leaders.
Well, it is. And of course, we will report on all that stuff no matter what is going on this coming year. So if you enjoyed the show as we wrap it up, please tell one friend. Jay and I would certainly appreciate that. And of course, we want to thank our wonderful sponsors, including the MLC, Music.ai, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. As we say many times, but it is so true. We could not do it without them. And we always appreciate their continued support. So on behalf of my good friend Jay Gilbert, I am Mike Etchart, and we both say thanks for listening, and we will be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.